Hello, my friend. So, you've done the work, maybe for years. The self help books, the personality tests, a course or 12, conferences, workshops, maybe a coach or professional help. And some of it was, well, genuinely helpful. In your notebooks, you've highlighted things and you've made some real moments of recognition. You probably even told a friend, oh, you have to read this. And yet, I've noticed something. Well, in my life and the lives of those that work with me, and it shows up over and over again. Most of these things give us a really good all of these processes, tips, and techniques, they've worked for other people or they wouldn't have written a book about it. But they are missing something, something vitally important if they're to be the map for our growth and success. What they don't have, it's the "You Are Here" sticker. You know that feeling when you walk into an unfamiliar mall. Do people still do that? And you find the map right in front of you, a huge billboard looking thing, and you see the store that you're looking for. It's right there. You can even see all the other stores around it. But you're standing there frozen. Why? Because there's no "You Are Here" sticker. Without the "You Are Here," the map is practically useless. Doesn't matter how detailed it is. Doesn't matter what you can see or that you can see exactly where you want to go. You can't plot a direction from a location you can't identify. That's what happens. These books, conferences, ideas, frameworks, they are transporting you into a brand new world, a new city, and they're plopping you down somewhere in that city, and they're handing you a beautiful map. And on it has a really big red destination X, clearly marking where you should go, but there's no sign of where you are. You just don't know where you're standing in the map. And then you're left to figure that out on your own. Your VQMe report is the sticker. That's what this course is about. Because what happened when you got your report? You were looking for a specific thing. Most people are. Something that would explain the gap, the one we've been talking about since course 2. Why you know what to do and can't make yourself do it. Why you're capable and yet still stuck at the same time. And the report had language for things you'd felt but couldn't name. That's the part that landed. But then came the part that felt like homework. Okay, so what do I do with this? Maybe you tried to connect it to something specific, a decision you're sitting on, a pattern that you keep repeating. And the connection almost made sense, but not quite. You could see the shape of it, but you couldn't quite grasp it. Or maybe you read it and thought, oh, this is interesting. But then you filed it away in the same place you file interesting things that don't immediately change anything. That's not unusual. A report without context is just data. And data without application is just interesting. And interesting, well, interesting doesn't move anything. What moves things is seeing your specific pattern in a specific situation you actually recognize. That's what we're doing in this course. So you've seen this pyramid. We built it together in course 3. Thoughts at the base, then emotions, then actions, then results. And we said most people try to change the results by forcing the A, the actions. A few try to manage the E, the emotions. Almost nobody goes to the T, or the thinking level. Yet your VQMe report lives there. And it may be a little unfamiliar to think about thinking. So it's not at the R, it's not at the A, it's not at here's how you tend to behave and what bucket we've put you in. It's at the T level, the thinking layer, the patterns that run before behavior ever happens. This is what makes VQMe different from every other assessment you've taken. It's not measuring what you do, It's measuring how your brain assigns value before you act on anything. 3 things your report is showing you. Not technical language, just what it means. First, where your brain has clarity. These are your cognitive assets, as we call them, places where your thinking tends to produce sound decisions, clear energy, and action that actually sticks. And when you're operating from these patterns, things feel easier than they probably should or otherwise do. And you're not forcing it, you're flowing. Number 2 is where your brain has distortions. These are your cognitive biases, not character flaws, not weaknesses. These are patterns that used to serve you in some way, or you wouldn't have developed them. And this is where the perspective your brain uses tends to produce some friction. Avoidance, overreaction, paralysis, anxiety, doubt, or the specific brand of stuck that you keep running into. The bias isn't the problem. It's the invisibility of the bias that's the problem. Because if you knew you had it, you could avoid it. So number 3 is how those two interact. And this is the part people sometimes overlook. Assets and biases don't operate separately. They're all up here in your head. How they relate to each other, where they push and pull against each other, that interaction is often what explains the patterns that surprised you in the report. Now, as we move through this course, I hope you've recognized so far that you're not a collection of labels, you're not a type, you're not a 4-letter code. You do have a set of patterns operating in real time, creating your specific emotional responses, driving your specific actions, producing your specific results. The report mapped those patterns at the foundation, and this course shows you what they look like in the moments that matter most. In the next few lessons, we're going to look at specific patterns, the ones that show up most commonly in people doing this work, and you're probably going to recognize yourself in at least one of them, if not all. Because that's when the map stops being a piece of paper and starts being useful, because you start to see where you are. So let's go back to someone we talked about in Course 3. She'd been typed as an Enneagram 4, the individualist, spent a long time building her identity around that, her creativity, her depth, the sense of being fundamentally different from other people. She came in with her VQMe report, and something specific showed up in the T layer, a pattern in how she processed her own value. She was consistently running a comparison that made her feel like she came up short. Not because she was being dramatic, not because she was a 4, because her brain had a specific thinking pattern that kept producing a specific experience. When she could see that pattern clearly in her own data, not in a general personality description, the Enneagram 4, that story, it stopped working. Not because we argued her out of it, but because she could see what was actually creating the feeling she'd been calling being a 4. She didn't change overnight, but she stopped using the label as an explanation. She would catch herself every now and again, and she started making different choices. She took agency over her own life, not just her actions or her emotional life, but her thought life. And from there, everything shifted. Not because she forced herself and told herself she had to, should, and must, but because the thinking pattern wasn't invisible anymore. That's the difference between understanding a framework and seeing you and your pattern in that framework. That's the difference. Your report already has this mapped. If you want to walk through one pattern together, mapped to something you're actually dealing with right now, that's what the private VQ calls for. 15, 20 minutes, your patterns, your situation. As usual, the link's below. Now, over the next 4 lessons, we're going to look at 3 patterns that show up consistently in this work. Decision freeze, what's actually happening at the T layer when you can't make a decision, even when you have all the information you need. Self-sabotage, one I'm particularly familiar with, and what's happening when you work towards something you want, then find a way to make it not happen, and why it never feels like self-sabotage in the moment. And then the high performance trap. What's happening when you're executing well, hitting the marks, and feeling completely empty? When logic has been doing all of your work and your heart stops getting a vote. Those 3 patterns, all at the thinking layer, all visible in your report, and all of them are going to show up in situations that you probably recognize. If you're already feeling the connection between what we've covered and what you're sitting with, I just want to encourage you, book the call. The link's just down below. And one more thing before we move on. When you got your VQMe report, what's the one thing that surprised you the most? Not the part that felt accurate or the part you didn't expect. I want you to drop that in the comments. I'm just genuinely curious. And you might find you're not the only one who got surprised by that particular thing that surprised you. I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.